Welcome to Sacred Conversations, a place where Dr. Nicole Dolan and I, Robin Bethel, along with a myriad of guests, explore some of the sacred threads and wholeness of life, held within the light and within the dark, held within the immensity. Thank you for being with us. In this episode, Nicole and I talk about what's meeting us in this moment, which in the Northern Hemisphere where we live includes crossing through the solstice peak of light and into summer. We also talk of the astrology that swirls from this June and how it may offer a breath of extra nourishment, something we welcome. We hope you enjoy listening. Happy solstice, Nicole.
Happy solstice to you.
Today we're just going to kind of touch into this moment of time, and I don't know what we'll talk about exactly, but I feel, so we're recording this on the solstice, and I feel like it's this kind of peak of energies, and I'm feeling into the energies of the moment a lot. And so I think I kind of just want to talk about that and then have you talk about that as well. And I think how we might touch into that might be wildly different, but yet still, thematically related to like into this summer moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to go first because I'm going to touch on the astrology a little bit and I'll connect it to you as well if you like.
Absolutely.
So I think this moment is so astrologically beautiful because, well, first, so we're going into Cancer season, which I'm a fan. But also, there's a transit that just started. I can't remember the exact day. It might have been June 9th, but earlier in June, where Jupiter, which is the planet representing wisdom, abundance, growth, just moved from being in Gemini for about a year into Cancer. And so Gemini is considered the hardest place for Jupiter to be. It still is showing, I feel like over the course of that last year, June to June, a lot of growth in the area of our chart where we hold Gemini, but maybe it was like a little more growth I think often has the push, the pull, like, those edges, but maybe it came from that even more for some of us, like, for example, it was in the space of my committed relationships, and there were huge shifts, a final death in a certain romantic space. And so it was bringing me into such deeper alignment, but not through like the aligned thing falling in that moment. It was like the release. I also have some friends, and for them, that's what I saw also. It was more about the release. Like, for example, one friend, it was in her space of public roles. And in that year, she released a really toxic job, and so it was kind of more the overtones of difficulty through the whole year in that space, but yet still really beautiful growth and change. But it was just, and maybe for some people it doesn't look like that. Maybe it was more the welcoming in of something, depending, all of our astrology is different. But my point is just Jupiter in Gemini is a more difficult placement, even though it's still in that place of abundance and growth. Now, Cancer is its best placement. Best is kind of a weird word to use, I guess, but it's just considered exalted. It's considered Jupiter's favorite place to be. So now we have the planet of abundance and growth and wisdom going from the hardest place for it to be to its easiest place. And so people in the astrological world are really excited because it's kind of like such sweetness, like such just like help and blessing coming in this space in our lives in a way that I think holds more gentleness and more nourishment, and so it's really lovely. And so like wherever Cancer falls in your chart, it's just lovely. Anyway, so I feel like it's just this beautiful, supportive energy that will be kind of radiating along with all that is complete and utter breakdown of old ways of being, right? So it's not like, "Oh, we're gonna go into picture postcard ease," because 'cause we're not meant to be in that, I would say, at all, but it's just like this nourishing support through things, and so I am very aware of that in this moment, and it feels like it's kind of giving, like, a breath of, yeah, just support through deep precipices of change and, like, destined realignment and, all of the falling apart that that involves. So that's what I just wanna offer about this moment, and it really starts in June, goes through the next year, so it lasts a long time. But yeah, the solstice is also just a beautiful moment in time, and for me, I do feel like just, being in different trust falls, I feel nearing, I guess, seeing where you land in ways. I guess that's maybe all I wanna just start off with, and I will tell you for you, you might already know this, but for you, your space, Cancer's in your 7th house, so it's in, like, committed relationships, so this might be a space where you feel like that nourishing, beautiful energy, come in, so especially, I think after it kinda simmers for a couple months.
Hmm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and yeah, I think that a couple of things that most stood out to me. First, I mean, I'll say there's relief, right, in hearing that we might be coming into a time as a collective where we get to exhale, take a breath, and
Mhm,
maybe feel more joy and peace and ease in some ways,
yeah,
and I think that that is probably very welcomed news to many. I mean, it always is, of
yeah,
course, but just with things that are happening in the world and the chaos at the macro level, but even so many of us are experiencing it at the micro level, which is how it goes. Whatever's happening out there is in here. So as above as below. So I think that there's, I'm just feeling into that exhale and feeling into the energy of what you're sharing. And it's like, oh,
mhm,
So I know that we could all use a little more breathing space and a little more joy and a little more ease. I know a lot of people going through really challenging and painful things right now. So my heart's been feeling a lot of compassion and a lot of sadness for what a lot of people are carrying right now.
mhm,
So I can just really appreciate feeling into like, and seasons change and we're going into summer and
mhm,
solstice welcomes us into summer and the sun is going to shine, at least for those of us in this hemisphere. And we're going to feel the warmth of that on our face and in our bones and energetically. And it's nice to hear that things may flourish around us as well. So,
yeah,
a really good reminder too for people struggling with, not only things that are happening right now, but like consistent phases of depression or anxiety or even cyclical. I've seen some people actually having some cyclical depression lately. And it's a really nice reminder that even in those darkest moments, it's like seasons change.
yeah,
Like
mhm,
this will not last forever, right? This too shall pass. That's what I was looking for. So, I took a couple of notes while you were talking, just words that were
mhm,
coming through. And the first one was release. And I really resonate with that. I think so many people do, probably like that process of transformation really does involve that release before you get
mhm,
the new, right?
mhm,
That is the hardest part of letting go. That's the trust fall was the other word that I
mhm,
wrote down that you said is trust fall, right? You're like, I'm in many trust falls right now. And me too. And I think others of us as well. And that trust fall is that space in between, which you know this, right? It's
mhm,
that space in between like standing on a cliff and being like, okay, I'm going to leap and I'm going to trust that the net's going to appear and it's going to be the right one and it's going to be within divine timing. And I can think of that in so many ways, whether it's like personal relationships that are no longer suiting us or meeting us where we want to be met, falling away and releasing before the new ones step in. Or I think of it as an entrepreneur too. Honestly, I teach people that whenever you feel that overwhelm and like, oh my gosh, like things have become too much and I'm feeling bogged down and there's this thing to get to and that thing. It's like, okay, that's your invitation to grow. It's time to like, bring others in. But before you do that, right, you have to, well, not before you do that, but let me say it this way, not to get too off point, but entrepreneurial wise, my experience whenever I grow a business is I always feel like, okay, I need to hire someone else, but I don't know really what their job's going to be. I don't really know like what
Mhm.
I really need them for. Do I have enough work for them? Can I pay them? And
Mhm.
in that role, I'm thinking of that as the trust fall. It's like, well, you have to be able to release fears and anxieties and surrender to like, yes, that's what's calling. Take a step forward and then trust that your business is going to grow and make up for that person that you just hired or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
that's why that's exactly coming through. But I just think of it, I think I'm thinking of it on so many different levels. So, to your point, if you wanted to apply it to astrology and say, well, whichever house that is in for you and whatever your experience has been in the past few months or how long we've been in that, I'm not sure, or a year, you might have to speak to that. But pay attention to where have you been, feeling like something's not fitting or something needs to release or something's ready to shift or change. And have you been leaning into that surrender and trust fall, or have you been fighting that? But just to really pay attention to that in all of these different ways that it can show up. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, so I would say release, surrender, trust fall. I identify with that all. I think we're coming out of a hard season, so really nice to hear like a deep exhale coming
Yeah.
into the summer.
Yeah, helping us with all the trust falls because I think, like, if we zoom out to I think that all of us more radically aligning with exactly what we're meant to be doing might require stepping away from things that seem more like the usual way, and so that brings just a lot of trust with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are so being called to that
Yeah.
now. Right? I mean,
Mhm.
ever since COVID, really, we started seeing people say like, okay, I'm gonna do this differently. So we see
Yeah.
people shifted all over the country, all over the world, and have shifted like jobs and the way that they show up and the way that they want to work and the way they want to be
Mhm.
treated at work. And
Yeah.
so certainly I think there's a lot of change that's happened there. And we are constantly called to continue to release what is not serving us, right? And that's not easy. That's like
Yeah.
I mean, for somebody who's in the business of transformation, I can say like
Mhm.
people, often when people come to do their work, they don't realize that doing their healing work is what's going to lead to transformation. Of course, that might be like a dream for some, and some may be conscious of that, but typically they'll come just not feeling well or dealing with symptoms of trauma or whatever it is. And,
Mhm.
and I always hold that trauma is the catalyst for transformation. So once we start to do our healing work, once we start to get ourselves to a place where we can be feeling more deeply and we can be listening more clearly to our soul, right? To what's calling us. One of the processes of that healing often is what we call like there's different names for it, but like one of them is like we call it like pruning, like the pruning
Mhm.
stage, the shedding, right?
Mhm. All the death.
Yeah, whichever analogy you
Mhm.
wanna use, there is that process in growth, in healing. I mean, it's obviously in nature too, right? And just to finish that thought, that process often it's often very painful because when we heal and we step into our true selves, we're still ourselves, but we're different, and we don't always fit with the people who we may have been feeling aligned with before,
Mhm.
or the way of being that we were in our coping mechanisms, or whatever that is. So there really is this pain, I think, attached to feeling the call to letting certain things go. It's not
Mhm.
easy, right?
Yeah. Mm. Do you wanna talk any more about what's been moving in your world for the summer, entering into the summer?
Yeah, how do I talk about that? What's happening for me? I'm going through a lot of change.
Mm.
I'm often going through a lot of change
Mhm.
though. I'm a double Capricorn, and I found out recently in India I am a triple Capricorn. So
What other thing do they use? Like, what do you
I don't know if you would just say Vedic astrology. I'm not really sure.
Oh, yeah, I mean, like, what so that's your rising and your sun, but you're saying, like
Oh, rising sun and moon,
Oh, but in Western astrology, your moon is not Capricorn. Oh,
Aquarius.
okay, gotcha.
So kinda interesting, yeah, so I was like, "That makes sense because 'cause I'm actually, like, one of the most intense people that there is out there."
Yeah.
So so while I have these, like, beautiful, amazing, intense, awesome experiences,
Mhm,
I also have, really intense, difficult experiences too.
mhm, mhm,
So I would say all of that is happening, I've still got challenges at home that are extraordinary in ways and test me every single day. I mean, sometimes I have a really good day and I feel like, this went so well and I've got
mhm,
this
mhm,
out and but that's more rare. Um but but I am still I do still see, of course, all the growth and wisdom and the places that I do understand and the ways that I can help others from being on the journey of motherhood with autism and
mhm.
ADHD. It's a highly, highly sensitive family.
Yeah.
So I would say that's all, as it always is and ever unfolding and continuing to teach me. But I have recently, I would say in my own seasons of pruning, I have had a lot of experiences personally of stepping out and letting some things go. And yeah, that's a vulnerable share for me, publicly speaking.
Mhm,
I went through, gosh, okay, let's see. Let's drop in. So the story goes, I went to my prayer practitioner a couple of months ago and I sat across from her and I was having a really hard time. I was upset. And I think I've spoken about her on here before, but if I haven't, I'll say this. I came across this woman in a spiritual center when I first moved here and the intention when I went to her is I said, I want you to teach me how to pray. I was like, I know how to meditate. I'm deeply connected to my intuition. I feel, I'm really aligned with myself as a human on a spiritual journey. I get it as much as I can, and still learning and growing, of course. But I was like, but I don't know how to pray. I
mhm,
don't really know what that means. I'm not religious per se, and so since I only learned it through a Catholic lens growing up, I needed to understand it differently.
mhm,
And then, of course, it comes out later that this woman is like, not only this prayer practitioner, but she's a medium. And I'm like, of course you are.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
so we became good friends, and maybe we'll have to have her on the show at
That'll
some
be
point.
really fun.
I just love her. So I go and I see her once a month, and
Mm,
such a blessing to me. So I was sitting across from her a couple months ago, and I was in a lot of pain. I was in a lot of pain. I was sharing the responsibility that I felt for a family member of mine's difficulty, is what I'll share. And I felt it because I was sharing that, like, well, when I was young, I would care for this person, and then trauma interrupted that. I was traumatized, and I went away, like emotionally, spiritually, physically, and so I felt like because of that lack in my mothering, like there was an impact on this family member even to this day. And I felt all this suffering and pain about it, like I felt like it was kind of my fault. And I also was carrying a weight of a friendship that had recently ended. Talk about endings, but it was like a really good friend. And she was going through a depression, so I know she was in her space, and I felt like, and we talked about, like, there was a space where I didn't meet her in the right way, and I came back with like full accountability and like, I'm so sorry if I missed that, and she just was in her depression not having the capacity to like process that with me, and so I went into this deep abandonment, this very old wound, and felt like really bad about myself and really like, oh my gosh, like I this and I that. And so the point is I go to this prayer practitioner, her name's Christine, and I'm sitting down with her and I'm telling her like, the story about my family, the story about my friend. I think there were a couple other ones I like laid in there that had the same theme of like, what did I do and how is this my fault and how can I like I don't know, like I don't even think I had a question. I think I was just blaming myself for all of it, you know?
Mhm.
And she looked at me and she said, "Can I tell you something?" Yeah. So she says, "I've never seen you like this before. And I also want to tell you that you have an uncanny, like wild ability to find some way to carry everyone's shit as your own." I was like, what? So, that was news to me, especially as like a depth psychologist and a coach,
Mhm.
holistic and a therapist and a, clinical director. Like I teach people like not to carry other people's stuff. I know how to
Mhm.
like energetically protect myself from carrying other people's stuff. I like meet with people who are carrying like heavy burdens and trauma and pain and I I'm able to like move through the world fluidly and like love them through it and trust their
Mhm.
path. And, sometimes I carry them more heavily because they're going through something at the moment. But the point is like, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm so boundaried and I'm
Mhm.
thriving in the world. Like, I don't struggle with that. you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. I think you should look at it. And I also gave her the answer of like, that doesn't make any sense to me though, because this is my family. These are my friends. Like, it
Mhm.
is my job, especially my children, right? It is my job to like carry this. And she just, very gently offered me an invitation to just be with that. And the next couple of months, it took a little while, but I invited the challenge. I always do, right? Like I listen really deeply when someone reflects something to me. I trust everyone that we come across as a teacher or a mirror on our path. So I really worked on being very intentional to lean into that. And as I did, I started to really see, and I spoke to you about this a little bit before, but this is the origin story.
Mhm.
I started to really see a depth level of self-abandonment. Like
Mhm.
like, wow, like, you're right. It's not my responsibility as a young child to mother, and it's not my fault that, like, trauma interrupted that dysfunctional system anyways. And I did, miss my friend. My friend said something and I missed her. I misinterpreted it. But I apologized and I was accountable and loving and willing to like show up. And something I even said to her was, I was like, hey, like, if you've ever felt like alone or missed before, because you've never told me this, we've been friends for 20 years, 15 years. I said, just know that like I am one of your friends that's like going to do whatever it takes to like see that in myself so I can show up for you better.
Mhm.
I couldn't have done anything else, right? To like give and love and try. I'm not perfect, but like I couldn't have given anything else. So when I started to see that and then I started threading through and this friend has always been such a sacred mirror for me. Like
Mhm.
we've done this for each other over the years of like we've always shown each other something. And so she was even in that rift, that pain, she was teaching me, you
Mhm.
know? And so she was teaching me and I started really really unfolding that and as I moved through it to come to this pruning process, it
Mhm.
was wild. Um
Mhm.
I actually went back to this friend which I would have never done. Okay? So my own like I said, we're getting personal here, but my own abandonment wounding that can come alive makes it so that when my friends who I love get mad at me or not really get mad at me, but like that was like the evolution of it at one point in my
Mhm.
life. Now, we're older, we don't really get mad at each other. But if I feel like, I've made a mistake or I created some riff or I could be, responsible for something, I was really, really, really hard on myself, and I was
Mm,
really scared that they were never coming back. So
mm,
I also had friendships in my life where I would just never really tell them if I didn't feel like our friendship was, like,
mm,
fully aligned, or I didn't feel like they were meeting me halfway. I would maybe tell them, but then, like, if they kind of withdrew from me or shut me down or something, I'd shapeshift, so that I
mm,
wasn't too much, I didn't want them to leave me.
mhm,
And so anyways, in my period of release, like, to bring it back to your question, in my I am not the astrologically well-versed one, so I don't have the language for it, but in my season of Jupiter in Gemini,
mhm,
I started when I awoke into this and I recognized my level of self-abandonment, how willing I was to carry maybe not my clients' weight on my back, but
mhm,
personal life on my back
mhm.
in a way that really honestly wasn't what I needed to be doing. When I came into that awareness and I started working through that shedding, as so it is, the universe was like, okay, here's another one.
Yeah, integrate it.
Here's another one. I had text messages from friends that I hadn't like really heard from or been in deep contact with, one after another within a
Mm,
week. And I found myself in a place, and this is why I'm saying this is so personal. I found myself in a place where I just was like, I need to be really honest with myself. Like, does that person want to show up in this relationship with me fully? Like, do I matter to them as they matter to
mm,
me? Will they make time and space for me as I do for them? Or will they not? Am I still, kind of like just fun Nicole and like, cool, like we'll see each other if it works out? Or do they want to meet me in this space? And it was scary for me. I'm like, I'm actually watching my body, my somatic movements right now. I'm like rubbing
mm,
my legs to like soothe
mhm.
myself because I responded to each one of them completely authentically.
Yeah.
And that was my season of shedding.
Mm. In that relationship space. Mm.
Hmm.
Well, you've told me a piece about the one, and then, but because we had our when we had our conversation on your book in the Art of Chaos, I feel like it. I think yes, that was the conversation where I said something about you and Ella, and having observed like for a long time, you almost just held that journey as, your journey, like what needed to be healed in you that would let the external then, shift. And of course, we talked about, of course, there are things, that you needed to do that you did do that were beautiful, but like for a period, you held that as like the key. And when we talked about that, I think you'd already come to this. You'd
Yeah.
come to the awareness that, like, oh gosh, I've really been doing this. So, okay, now I see that like flowed forward from that question from your prayer practitioner.
Yep.
I knew about the one friend, but it sounds like a really hard season because I feel like you love the people in your life, you know?
I do. I do. I I am such a lover,
Mhm.
Like I love deeply
Mhm.
and I love forever too,
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
there's not a person in my life that I've ever loved that I will not always love at some
Mhm.
level.
Mhm.
And so it's not easy for me, It's not easy for me, of course, to lose a friend or, a relationship and that's true for all of us. But just to speak to the depth of that, like, I guess
Mhm.
just from my experience, not trying to compare it to anyone else's, it's really painful for me.
Mhm.
Something else I think that many people who do live deeper lives can understand is it's also really painful because when you have relationships that don't want to meet you in a deeper place, they run from you,
Mhm.
right? So whether it's, someone you've fallen in love with and then the love comes to such a place of depth that it's like that's scary for them, or friendships that, like some of my most like wild, crazy, fun friends, and
Mhm.
I have such a wild archetype. Like I'm so
Mhm.
in touch with the wild woman in myself and have been my whole life. So I like my wild, crazy friends,
Mhm.
you know, but they're the ones that are unavailable on like depth
Mhm.
emotion level. And
Mhm.
so the truth is to like find people in the world who are deeply committed to themselves, like doing their work, want to touch the depths of life and still be wild.
Mhm. The depths of life are wild. They're very wild, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So so I appreciate it. I'm grateful when I mean my favorite friendships are like, people like yourself, right? It's like you come
Mhm.
into my life with such deep meaning and synchronicity. And for us, we were in this shared project together. And then we're also like meeting in the forest and like writing the book on the beach,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
taking moments of like kindred and connection and then like separation so you can go like, do your
Mhm.
down by like the waves with the wind and the storm and it's like
Yeah.
I'm here to live, and live
Mhm.
and love deeply and the truth is like you also get hurt really deeply too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've really only had one close friendship that ended in kind of a grieving way,
Mm,
where it was like from a place of feeling in the close friendship and then being like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. And it was like a very intense weekend where I grieved it, and it was so emotional. And I haven't had to do that a lot, but that was definitely hard. I feel like coming into summer, and I mean, the world that we live in right now is, I mean, I feel like we are really like the old way of being is dying. And there's so many pains in that. And that over the next, I couldn't say 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, we're going to like really come into a space where how we are as humans together is fundamentally different.
oh
And
yeah.
we orient around what it means to be human and love rather than chasing commerce, chasing so much financial security. And like that's all, you know? And so, anyways, but I feel like in that there's so much breakdown. And in the US, like there's so much that we have going on right now that's horrible and yucky, and but it's like way beyond that. It's way beyond the US. It's like the whole civilizational everything that I think is breaking down, but that will bring us into something new over time. And um so okay, my point was saying that was in this moment when I talk about Jupiter moving into Cancer, like the backdrop is we are in a collective period of death that expands way beyond US, expands way beyond a few months, a year. Like that exists. That is true, I think. And so inherently, death brings a lot of initiatory edges, and a lot of just difficulty and a lot of suffering. So we have that as the backdrop, and then we also have just our individual lives that have difficult things that are still going to be difficult places here and there. But I think what I would say, like Jupiter and Cancer, it's like in a space we're getting a little extra like holding from Divine Mother, you know,
Mhm.
in this space for a time. We've got the context of all that's happening in the world, all that's happening in the US. Then you have all that's happening and family that's hard, right? Then you have work and you have friends, and then maybe, maybe this speaks to you or for you something about like you've really been going through this, a lot of different things, but going through a space of letting go of some of these friendships that
Mm,
you would have had to abandon yourself in ways, as you put it, a little bit to continue. And so now maybe for you, with it being in your space of committed relationships, because that goes beyond our romantic partner. It's like, I
mm,
would say we're like in committed relationships. It's like just significant relationship space. I hope that this does breathe in a little bit. Like it would make sense to me too. Just you've
mhm.
claimed that space. You've released what isn't fully aligned. And so, in the right time, more of what is fully aligned will come. So
Absolutely. I
I
think
hope
that's
that.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the conversation in the sense of really sharing and showing, I feel like my thing is always I always say this, "Well, what does that mean?" Right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
always the embodied framework of what that means. I'll show you
Mhm.
what that means.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so we're talking about the death and the release and how the release happens before the new comes in and how you have
Mhm.
to release. You have to be willing to prune, to shed in order for the new skin or the new leaves to grow. It's part of life. And, so many of us want to stay stuck in that process, but part of depression, anxiety, symptoms, etc., is being stuck instead of allowing yourself to change, to grow, to
Mhm.
heal, to let go. And so I would say this is a good example of being in that release. And to your point, and then also being in that trust fall, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, so I'm
Yeah.
surrendering. Let's see what's
Yeah.
next. And what's next is, I don't know if I want to say an absolute, but I'm drawn to saying, like, when you are pruning and releasing, the new thing is like never there yet.
Yeah.
Like, like you have to be willing to trust. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to step into the unknown, right?
Mhm.
But I do feel deeply aligned with what you're saying about summer and
Mhm.
hopeful. I have some trips coming up that I'm really excited about. I've decided to travel with a group of women who I
Mm.
don't know to Bali in the fall,
Oh,
and
wow.
I haven't been out to that side of the world since 2013.
I love that. Okay.
So,
When are you going?
September 15th.
Okay. Well, I'll also just tell you, and then we can, we don't have to keep returning to this, but in terms of Jupiter and Cancer, right? Like the movement started in early June, but there are some other astrological aspects happening in the next few months that still make it like, it's like there's still things qualifying it kind of like there's still pieces of tensions within that then release at the start of September that just make it even a little more like, here's a bigger rush of that bounty. So I love that that's when you're traveling.
Like I said, I have a couple trips coming up that I'm excited about. I'm venturing out with my family to Hawaii soon for the first time without support.
Mhm,
Really
mhm,
big for us, when you have deal with some of the things that we do. It's a really big deal for us, and
mhm,
so praying goes well, and that we can find that we are empowered to do this together without always having support,
mhm, mhm,
and then also praying for the right support to be there when we need it, because we have a hard time keeping support.
mhm,
It
mhm.
is really hard, and people don't
Yeah.
want to deal with it. And so some very exciting things
Mhm.
happening that feel like that. And then just to share with you, we will begin querying the top agents that I'm interested in working with on September 1st.
Got a lot going on in September.
Yeah, so just a lot of what I would say is a lot of movement energy, a lot of busy but exciting things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Very neat. I feel like I'm still in the very rich void of not knowing like what will come in. And like my big trust fall was when I stepped away from a certain work thing back in August. And then like ever since January, I've been in the place of just allowing the space and just like still being held in the space. For me, Cancer falls into my second, or I'm sorry, in my eighth house, which is the space. It includes a lot of things. It includes death. It includes that like underworld, but it also includes other people's money given to you.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I feel like it's this space where like I kind of came into like the end of last summer of such absolute trust in like a physical world way. Like I feel I'd already come to the emotional stepping off of a cliff based on listening. But then this is like in this practical life way where I was like, you know what? I feel support of the divine in a way like I've come to feeling that like it's the support of a physical person next to me. I came to that, and that felt like a really large threshold, and then ever since, it's been like, now here's where you integrate it and actually, like, live it.
Right.
Almost it feels kind of like initiation, like you came to the place where, like, you actually believed it so fully, but now here you're gonna, like, live. And I think I've talked a little bit about, like, the flying, piece where it's, like, getting to where you don't even look for the safety net and you're just, like, just going, and so I feel like I'm still just in that space, stepping off the edge and just, like, free falling and being in such comfort in that for the most part, with occasional, like, pangs, and then, like, resting in that and, just almost feeling like crossing more and more thresholds even, where, like, you think you're in it and then, yeah, I don't know. So it's interesting. I feel like I don't know, like, where it will all land still, but it feels to me like a really deep initiation of, like, moving through the physical world, um, as a single mom in total dark and just moving through it based on these whispers, like, unequivocally. Yeah, it feels like this deep initiation into kind of something that then I am meant to, like, reflect in the world. So, anyways, so that's where it falls for me in my chart. And it's funny because a lot of how astrology comes to me when I become aware of a movement happening, it's often where, like, I've been living something out already. I've been living out a story that I'm very connected to intuitively and spiritually, like, what's happening, and and then I'll learn of a movement.
Mhm.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like, that completely touches into what this story has been. Often the peace will come in after that story, like, I already feel it inside of me, and then it's like, "Oh, that makes sense right there," you know?
Mhm.
So, it is just I feel it's this time, though, where I think a lot of the things, whether someone's in, like, a trust fall or like, just an area where things have been a little bit more challenging, there might be a space where you kind of get to come into a little bit more of the bloom or more of the warmth,
Yeah.
and probably especially, like, um, proportionally maybe into how much death you've allowed.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I hope that Jupiter in Cancer can bring nourishment and whatever continues to be hard, I hope that everyone can feel a little more of being held by Divine Mother first and possibly see new blooms coming.
Beautiful. I was just going to circle back for a moment. You were speaking about how when you're going through a season of transformation, growth, whatever you would call it, at the end of that journey, then you come upon like, astrology that tells you like, "Oh, hey, this is the season you were in." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense."
Mhm.
It reminds me so deeply, and I appreciate you sharing this because it's actually maddening for me that this happens, but I go through that too, and it reminds me of it's like how I describe it is it's like I'll be on the spin cycle in the washing machine,
Mhm.
or like, imagine yourself in the ocean where it's like there's a big wave that crashes down and you don't know which way is up and how to get back to shore
Mhm.
just spinning, going through all of the things. And then I'll come upon, what it looks like for me is often through that. I'm like, I'm the philosopher, right? So I'm like learning and growing and building and
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, now I'll create this way to like help others. And then what often happens when I have like, my theory put together or whatever it is, I find it in the theory of someone else, right? Like I find it in
Mhm.
like somewhere else, like it was already written. And
Mhm.
and not completely, of course, I have my own offering just like we all do in the
Yeah.
world. It's
Yeah.
different, it's its own edge. But the point is it's like I feel like when you go through that process, like each time that it happens, it does feel maddening because it's just like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, like if somebody would have just like somebody gave me a term the other day. I was sitting with these two docs and they were like, "Well, of course you heard this term, you know?" And it was like a term about like literally like an acronym to explain like a psychological process. And they're
Mhm.
like, I mean, she's going to know, and they move on. And I was like, oh, actually, I've never heard that term. And then I thought about it and I was like, that acronym could have saved me like 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was in the field, like, I should have known that term. Somehow I missed it in
Mm.
grad school. And so I feel like it's so deeply meaningful too, though, right? Because we come out of that spin cycle deeply integrated and embodied, and you have the embodied experience now of like, what does that mean? Or
Mhm.
what does that season look like?
Mhm.
So I actually have such a great appreciation for it, like a
Yeah.
love and a hate, to be honest, because it's like, oh man, that's just
Yeah. I feel like probably, like, both vantage points, would belong, right? Like, someone might like, for you, it might be like a psychological theory or framework, and, like, how I was talking about it, it might be knowing what astrological movements are happening and how they'll intersect, and I feel like knowing that going in, then maybe that will be a really beautiful part of how you hold the unfolding life that's happening. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's gorgeous too, and it's integrative. You're still, like, gonna have to live it out, right? But then sometimes when before you have any sort of grounding, any sort of anchors, any sort of external stories, right, that you're bringing in, like, to have that story emerge in complete fullness and knowing within yourself, that's beautiful too, because then it's completely organic, but yet, I mean, in that complete organic experience, we're still met by the world, like,
Mhm.
in all the things. So we're still getting external inputs that are shaping that, which is just the same as the other, but the other is way more dramatic. Like, here's a huge external. So I
Yeah.
feel like they're both like, it's just gonna meet us in different ways. So anyways, but yeah, like, so I'm seeing what you're saying.
Well, and then like coming through it, and then on the other side realizing that like there was a map, or maybe
Mhm.
there was a map. And
Yeah.
so, but I think of that, like I said, I just hold it as like, who we are in the world. Like we speak to that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, like, speaking for myself and maybe you, like, it's like, I'm a seeker, right? Like I am here to embody life and experience it and to be in service and support and share with
Mhm.
others. So it makes sense, like I
Yeah.
do hold it with great meaning that
Yeah.
like, oh, like I could have had that acronym, and that acronym really would have changed things for me. Like I really had to go through my own journey of discovering.
Yeah. I think a lot of people might reach for the framework, maybe a lot in like spiritual spaces or whatnot, and they don't live it in an embodied way yet. But then over time, hopefully more and more so. But we all reach sometimes, and then sometimes we make our own maps and
Yeah.
and we then inspire people with the encouragement through maybe and maps and seeing others move, right?
Mhm.
Who are kind of maps in their way, just mirrors and then to, like, be supported through pieces of the journey,
Mhm.
and then hopefully just come more and more to where you really that compass inside you is so strong that you don't
Yeah,
need the maps as often.
absolutely. And then in the end, you still find yourself your own story within the story.
Yeah, the pattern of the whole.
Lives the whole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Okay, well, I think that's a good spot to leave for today. Welcome, summer, everyone, and to us. And we'll see all the little glimmers of warmth that it holds for us.
absolutely. Happy summer.
Happy summer.
Thank you for being with us today. If you feel called, follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on Instagram or YouTube at sacred.conversations.podcast. And most of all, may you keep opening to yourself, to the mystery, and to the story within you that's still being written.